his collaboration with David Fincher, Woody Allen, and I was mentioning one particular film called Delicatessen. If you haven't watched the film, please watch the film. It's a great film. John Perret-Junet, who directed Amélie, and Darius Conji, wonderful director. Gus Van Sant, who did Good Will Hunting, who was the director of Good Will Hunting. He has worked with Darius Conji, then Woody Allen, David Fincher. I obviously mentioned, and recently Alejandro Inarritu worked with Darius Conji, and Amor. I mentioned the film while discussing. It's a beautiful film, um, and Darius Conji shot it. And I mentioned Janusz Kaminski, another wonderful cinematographer. I should have mentioned last day, but suddenly somehow I forgot to mention. So, anyways, Janusz Kaminski again, collaboration with Steven Spielberg mostly. Um, you will see. And one movie I will particularly would like to mention, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. It's a beautiful movie. Um, you should watch it. But Schindler's List and all these movies, though, you have heard of. Black and white, great work in black and white in Schindler's List. And there is a movie called War Horse. Many people talk about Janusz Kaminski, Munich, and then Saving Private Ryan. We can talk about all, but we will do that in another session. Is it on or not? Suddenly, because I already talked about 5 minutes, for like 5 minutes. I don't know whether it's visible or not. So what I did is I mentioned Darius Konji, I mentioned Delicatessen with John Perret-Junet, a great filmmaker who did Amélie, and then I mentioned his collaboration with David Fincher, Woody Allen, and while mentioning Janusz Kaminski, I was mentioning Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, Munich. Then there is a movie I mentioned, War Horse, which is having a great cinematography, and then many people don't know about the film, but it is having a great cinematography. So, working closely with Steven Spielberg. But I mentioned Amour too when I mentioned Darius Konji. It's a beautiful film, and recently he worked with Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu too. With different directors, again the same thing with different directors, different requirements, different storytelling, but wonderful, great film cinematographers and filmmakers. Daria, Janusz Kaminski. I mentioned the collaboration with Steven Spielberg. So Saving Private Ryan, and here I mentioned one film particularly, that is The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. I think it got stuck, so for the 2 or 3 minutes you couldn't hear, I think. But in case if you didn't hear, Diving Bell and the Butterfly, wonderful film, and collaboration with Steven Spielberg. Now, quickly, let me move to the next list of cinematographers. Oh, I think in the last session I mentioned Chivo, Emmanuel Lubezki. You all know Emmanuel Lubezki, and I also mentioned that he was my go-to cinematographer when I wanted to make my movie, and he still very much is a wonderful cinematographer. But why are you going for a particular cinematographer? That is a decision you can make, looking at his or her style, works. Because if you see the movies, uh, like for example, Tree of Life with Terence Malick, Birdman, and Revenant with Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, Children of Men with Alfonso Cuarón, and Gravity. Again, the New World with Terence Malick. So how he is helping to tell the story with the director's vision. So that's why you should study these filmmakers. And poetry, some people are going for poetry, some people are not going for poetry in cinematography. So you know Roger Deakins, I didn't mention. If you have seen Skyfall, if you have seen 1917, I prefer 1917 and Skyfall. 1917, the shots, and then Prisoners, then Blade Runner 2049, Empire of Light, No Country for Old Men. Again, if you look at Shawshank Redemption, he has worked with Frank Darabont, uh, Roger Dickens. And again, when you're looking at Empire of Light or 1917, he is working with Sam Mendes. And then when you're looking at other films like uh, No Country for Old Men, he's working with Coen Brothers. And then Blade Runner 2049 with Denis. So different directors, again, different requirements, different styles. But wonderful, wonderful. Sicario is a wonderful movie. You should watch these movies. Once you have this visual memory, or you have the visual aesthetics, when you know how each shot is helping to tell the story, each frame is helping to tell the story, how the camera is helping in storytelling, then we can go for higher discussions, more discussions, where that I am mentioning, in the last session I mentioned, which was not quite right. I mentioned that I can look at a shot, and I can show you a shot, and I can tell you the depth of field, whether it's a shallow depth of field or it's a wide depth of field, the kind of lenses used, the perspectives used, whether it's a steady cam shot, whether it's a handheld shot, whether it's a smooth crane or a dolly or a tracking shot. I can just look at the shot, looking at the movement, or just looking at the composition. I can tell you what kind of aperture used. So that takes a lot of expertise. But you can look at lighting. I mentioned few things, if you haven't heard, like camera angles, continuity, cutting, close-ups, composition, then lighting, source of light, the direction of light, color palettes, your visual aesthetics, then the texture of of the of this visual requirement, the texture of the what I can say, the picture, whatever you are shooting, uh, everything will work either for the story or maybe against the story. And when you have the synergy of all those elements, then you can tell the story in a really great manner, along with the director's vision, with the director's collaboration. So again, going to the other two good cinematographers, I want to mention Rachel Morrison. I would like to see more works from Rachel Morrison for sure. I think she has a lot more to give. And Rachel Morrison has worked in Mudbound, The Harvest. Mudbound is one movie you should watch. Then Dope. So, and one movie, another cinematographer I will mention, Reed Morano. You should watch her too. Again, wonderful cinematographer. Why I mention, because many people talk about why are we mentioning gender, because many people are explicitly mentioning gender, so we have to mention gender, because we have very few cinematographers, female cinematographers, female directors. And when we have, I mean, the gender can change depending on the requirement. It is not like that you have to take a female cinematographer only. It depends on a lot of factors. It depends on a lot of things, whatever is required for that particular movie. So Reed has her own style, Rachel has her own style, whatever the director is requiring. Then I can talk about another cinematographer, female cinematographer. If you have seen The Power of the Dog, then you may understand Jane Campion. She's from Australia. Addie Wegner. I wanted to show her too because maybe many people don't know about her, but she has done incredible work. Zola, Lady Macbeth, you know, especially I will say The Power of the Dog. It's a really good work photography. So these people you should know. So again, gender cannot be a constraint. If you want to be a cinematographer, if you want to be a director, I always push for that. You want to be a filmmaker, you want to be a cinematographer, you want to be whatever you want to be, you want to do that, your gender should not be a constraint, a restriction. So rather you should go for the movie. um, Robert Elswit, I must mention, especially with Paul Thomas Anderson. So when we have a director cinematographer relationship, it's a great relationship. Sometimes it varies. Sometimes you go to a different cinematographer. It's part of the job. We all do it, or everyone does it almost, or some people do it, some people may not do it. But again, it is coming from the requirement or the situation. But for example, Christopher Nolan, when he started with Wally Fisher, great cinematographer. Now he is working with Hoytema, another great cinematographer. Again, Robert Richardson has worked with a lot of directors. I mentioned Last Day. Darius Conji, I mentioned. Again, your Roger Deakins, I mentioned. Robert Ilswith is the go to cinematographer for Paul Thomas Anderson. I won't mention still, but great works together. There Will Be Blood, Punch Drunk Love, these films you should know. Then we can talk about cinematography. And beautiful performance. Magnolia, There Will Be Blood. For example, There Will Be Blood, people talk about, um, uh, I mean, the performance of the actor, you know. But many people don't understand that performance, Daniel Day Lewis, whatever he gave as performance, that was captured by a cinematographer, and the set was designed by art director or production designer. So everything is coming together to tell the story. And great direction. So, and Paul Thomas Anderson, again, great director, wonderful director. And when you see these films, you feel that the thing for filmmaking. That's what you need to know. Rodrigo Prieto, I mentioned Last Day, but have I had mentioned to some Indian cinematographers, Amores Perros. If you haven't seen Amores Perros by Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, you watch Rodrigo Prieto's work. Later, recently, he has done some great work with Martin Scorsese, obviously. But again, Killers of the Flower Moon, then Silence. But Amores Perros, that thing about cinema, that thing about filmmaking, you will see how different structures, different stories are coming together to tell a story. Wonderful direction by Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, no denying that. But Rodrigo Prieto's work. So again, the relationship, when we make a movie, we are telling a great story. So again, one cinematographer I will mention, I thought he would do more work, Bradford Young, but maybe he will do, but with a lot of potential. So Selma, if you have seen Selma, he has done the cinematography. Bradford Young. I will quickly go through the cinematographers. Huh? Then we will take one session, and then we will do. Michael Ballhaus. Last day I forgot to mention. It was in my mind, but I wanted to do it in another session. If you have seen Raging Bull, the shots of Raging Bull, you know, you remember how it is like. He has worked with Martin Scorsese again. So wonderful cinematographer. Mike Nichols, Rainer Werner Fassbender, then James Brooks, Wolfgang Peterson, who directed Troy, and then many other movies. Michael Ballas, wonderful filmer, wonderful cinematographer. But again, with Martin Scorsese, when he's telling you how to choose black and white, how to go for a particular style of filmmaking, it is coming from a lot of passion from cinema. Then Russell Carpenter. You have seen the movie Titanic, but you don't know who is the cinematographer. So let me tell you, Russell Carpenter, working with James Cameron. Right. So these things, and let me quickly go through all these people, my favorite people, and then let me come to other people as well. When I mentioned Darius Conji, Delicatessen, you should also know about Bruno Del Bonel. I mentioned Amelie, same director John Perry Jeunet, but Darius Conji did Delicatessen, but Bruno Del Bonel did Amelie. Now, many people remember Amelie for its cinematography only. Inside Llewyn Davis, the tragedy of Macbeth, again with Coen brothers. Now, Macbeth, again, the Coen brothers need to come together. I would like them to come together, but with different directors, different cinematographers. Then one director called Ellen Kuras, one the cinematographer, my bad. Eternal Sunshine of Spotless Mind, Swoon, Lee. Lee is the latest one. Kate Winslet is doing it, and so then your Claudio Miranda. Before that, I will say, Nestor Almendros. I'm doing a mix, everything together. Days of Heaven before Emmanuel Lubezki. If you look at Emmanuel Lubezki, the movies of Terence Malick, before Emmanuel Lubezki, when he did Days of Heaven, it was Nestor. Wonderful cinematographer, wonderful. So we will talk about all these people. Eric Romer, one name comes up with Nestor Almendros. Then Claudio Miranda. Recently, you have seen Top Gun Maverick, but I will say go for Curious Case of Benjamin Button, go for Life of Pi, and again with David Fincher and Lee, different directors, different requirements, storytelling requirements, aesthetics requirements. Oblivion, when we talk about Top Gun Maverick and Oblivion, you like the visuals. Who shot it? Claudio Miranda. So those things. Ask these questions when you like a picture. The like a frame, like the way the shot was taken. Go for your research. Who is the one behind it? Then I will say Haskell Wexler. You should know these people, Haskell Wexler, then Bill Pope. You have seen the Matrix, right? Who has shot the Matrix? Bill Pope. So you know about the cinematographer as well. Then Greg Fisher, again another Australian cinematographer. Zero Dark 30. If you have seen the movie called Zero Dark 30, Lion was a good one. Dune was a good one. But Greg Fraser, eh, recently the Batman is there. But I will say Dune. Go for Dune. Then go for your, this Zero Dark 30. If you want to see cinematography helping storytelling, apart from Jessica Chastain's wonderful performance, we will say that wonderful cinematography by Greg Fraser. Now Jack Cardiff. Again, I was talking about very few female filmmakers. So we know Sofia Coppola, we know Jane Campion, we know now Greta is doing great work because Greta is into filmmaking. Noah, Greta, they are into filmmaking. So we have very few female filmmakers. So again, coming back to that, you will understand we need more female filmmakers. Catherine Bigelow. Why I mentioned Zero Dark 30 was by Catherine Bigelow. Wonderful filmmaker, but very few, many people don't even know about it. So, Jack Cardiff, if you haven't seen Black Narcissus, watch the movie Black Narcissus. You will understand how wonderful cinematography with wonderful storytelling. Emmerich Pressburger, Michael Powell, these names you should know. And the thing about cinematography is sometimes we remember the music, sometimes we remember the score, sometimes we remember the cinematography, sometimes we remember how the emotion was portrayed, how the character was portrayed, how the emotion was directed, how the emotion was put on screen. We remember all those things. But when you are an aspiring filmmaker or an earnest film lover or cinephile, whatever you want to call yourself, you remember all of it, the whole experience of it. Maybe once you look at the musical elements, once you look at the cinematography elements, once you look at the editing, but you are learning. There is so much to learn. Even if you have learned about the craft and the technique, when you are looking at the same movie at different points of time, you are learning different things about life. At that point you were going through a different circumstance, at this time you are going through a different circumstance. You can relate to a movie in a different way. So it's always great to have cinema. uh, Stanley Cortez, I will mention one person. Chinatown. If I want to mention one movie, you should watch Chinatown. I am mentioning the very famous ones, or many things that people know, like The Night of the Hunter, The Magnificent Ambersons. I mentioned Greg Toland, but John Alonso. Many people talk about him too with this regard. And when you talk about this Braveheart, many people don't even know the director of cinematography or the cinematographer is John Toll. So you have loved the cinematography of Braveheart, but you don't know who is the cinematographer. So you go for that. Legends of the Fall. Again, a wonderful movie, one of my favorites. Thin Red Line. Then your Braveheart, John Toll, wonderful filmmakers, wonderful cinematographers. Again, with uh, the directors I have already mentioned, but you will see you have loved maybe all those movies, but you felt that the cinematography of this particular movie was somehow different from that movie. Now it is a pursuit starting, it's an exploration. Why this movie is visually different from that movie? Is it because of the director? Is it because of the cinematographer? Is it because of the storytelling requirement? Then you understand how the camera is helping to tell the story, right? So there is no end to learning, you can always learn. Another filmmakers, Alan Deview, one of my favorites. Empire of the Sun. If you have seen Empire of the Sun, Christian Bale, with Steven Spielberg, Alan Deview, wonderful film, wonderful cinematographer. Color Purple, you know, wonderful cinematographer. E.T. I think E.T. was done by Alan Deview only. Yeah, E.T. Color Purple, Empire of the Sun. William Faulkner, William Faulkner is the novelist. Rockefeller is the businessman. Then we should go for William Faulkner. Another wonderful cinematographer. So it is not in the name. What's in a name? It's in the work they have done. Then the work helps to make the name, or the knowledge, or the wisdom. So when you search William Fricker, you go for these names as well. Then you learn, you are going for cinematographer, cinematography in a very respectful manner. Then you're on Laszlo Kovacs or Kovac, Hungarian American filmmaker. Again, I mentioned we are not about the nationality. We are not talking about the nationality. Paper Moon, Easy Rider. You have heard about these movies. Vilmos Zsigmond. I was going to type Ghostbusters. Many people are fans of Ghostbusters. Why are you a fan of the movie? Is it because of the visual? Is it because of the storytelling? As a director, I think you need to know all of it. The better you are acquainted with the different aspects of filmmaking, you can tell the story in a different way. It is not like that, oh, you are learning cinematography, then it is something really bad. It is not like that. The more you are well aware of different aspects or the cinema as a language, the more you can tell your story in a different way. If somebody is needing any help, you can help them. You can go for a discussion, people will love to listen to. So in every way this is helpful, so there is nothing holding back. Vilmos Zsigmond, wonderful filmmaker, cinematographer. Heaven's Gate, Maccabee and Mrs. Miller, Close Encounters. This is a documentary. Blowout, then Scarecrow. Wonderful, wonderful movies. Last day I didn't mention Robert Altman. I was mentioning the crane shots and non-linear storytelling and all these things. You will understand. Robert Altman is one director you should look at. Then this Michael cinematographer. Hey, sorry, I'm so sorry. Nicholas Roeg. Before that, let me come to Andrew Laszlo, because Hungarian cinematographer. More than that, what we look for, the cinematography. wonderful cinematographer. Then you go for Nicholas Rigg, director and cinematographer both. So Don't Look Now, The Man Who Fell to Earth, Bad Timing, The Witches, wonderful cinematography you will see. Walkabout. So that, and then Caleb Deschanel. Acha, before that, Michael Chapman. I was going to write Michael Chapman, I think, or something similar. Michael Chapman. Again, worked with Martin Scorsese. Now the thing is, Michael Ballhaus and Michael Chapman. Who is the cinematographer of Raging Bull? If you make a mistake, find out. Maybe you don't know, but you find out. It's always good to learn. Then, Caleb Deschanel. So here, when I mention Caleb Deschanel, wonderful cinematographer, I mention his cinematography, not his nationality. We don't do it here, or you shouldn't, in fact. But even if you are into another training group where they are training you in that way, you can do that. But we are not doing. So it is not like Caleb Deschanel, Desh, and Chanel. Then you have Schwa, you have Desh, you have Chanel. Then you are mixing all these things and doing all these things, and you are figuring out. It's not like that. Caleb Deschanel is a human being, is a person, wonderful cinematographer. If you look at Patriot, Mel Gibson's performance, Heath Ledger, wonderful Black Stallion, wonderful Escape Artist, wonderful. Then recently Lion King, wonderful. So we look at his cinematography. I hope it is very clear. When I am mentioning Caleb de Chanel, it is not like Des, Chanel, Swa, hodgepodge of Swa, Desh, or Chanel. It's not like that. And it's also not just because of the name of the movies. We talk about the artistic contribution of the director. So, The Patriot by Mel Gibson, Heath Ledger's wonderful performance, Patriot, Black Stallion, Crusoe, Escape Artist, Fly Away Home, and then Black Stallion, and recently Lion King, wonderful works. And also not because of some other things, but titles and all these things. Some people train you in that way. We don't do that, and we should not do that because we respect cinema a lot more. John Alcott, Barry Lyndon. If you have seen Barry Lyndon, we talk about the cinematography, we talk about the one point perspective. John Alcott, wonderful cinematographer. Again, when you look at Barry Lyndon, many people remember Barry Lyndon's cinematography. I mean, when we talk about Kubrick, when we talk about Tarkovsky, often we talk about the cinematography. The way poetry was being told through the camera, or being shown through the camera. But when you search, you will see John Alcott when he is working with Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick had almost understanding of everything. I mean, he almost knew everything about cinema. I mean, no, nobody can know, but he almost knew everything about cinema more than anyone else. So that's a funny thing. But that's Stanley Kubrick. That's why his movies are different from others' movies. He's called a director's director for a reason. So that's why when John Alcott is working with Stanley Kubrick, the result is Barry Lyndon. One point perspectives. This is where I want to show. This is where I want to use the one point perspective to tell the story. Now you remember the visuals, now you remember the technique, now you remember how it was shot. But again, it comes to storytelling, then the technique and how it is helping to tell the story. So you should remember these cinematographers, the collaborations. And sometimes when we mention cinematographers and directors, for example, Alfonso Cuaron, when you are so involved in the filmmaking process, when he did Roma, Alfonso Cuaron shot it himself. It's a beautiful work in black and white. So Roma, when you look at Roma, you will see such beautifully shot. But he is the director too. That's why you want to tell the story in your way. You have a vision for the story and you go for it. Few other film cinematographers I will mention, like uh, Robert Burks or what. I think I have mentioned Alfonso Cuarón, right? Okay. Few other filmmakers, Christopher Doyle, I mentioned. Fortunately, if with next, I must mention many people. Verite, cinema verite. If you are into cinema verite, if you understand cinema verite, uh, the wrestler. There is a movie. She shot it beautifully. The wrestler. So again, your sensitivity, your aesthetics, how you are bringing it in your story, in the storytelling, it has a lot to do. So, and one of the recent filmmakers, uh, we all know the new filmmakers. With them, many people are collaborating. So, Linus Sandgren, if you have seen his work, he is doing wonderful job too. So many people, when you see Babylon, when you see La La Land, this Linus is doing wonderful work. You know, so again, he has worked with Damien Chazelle, where I mentioned Babylon and La La Land, then David O. Russell, Gus Van Sant, and different directors. But Damien has a very good relationship with Linus Sandgren, because he can communicate. If you see La La Land, wonderful work by Linus. So again, different directors, different requirements in storytelling, and accordingly you choose. And few other filmmakers I will mention. One is Chung Hun Chung. Let's come back to the Asian kind. Just give me one sec. So let's talk about the Asian filmmakers a bit. This is like Old Boy. When you have film like Old Boy, you have these filmmakers. Chung Hun Chung, Wonka. There is a movie called Wonka. I think this Timothy is playing William Wonka. So, and he did this last night in Soho. Then your Uncharted and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think Disney Plus did this Obi-Wan Kenobi. So Park Chan-wook. If you look at two filmmakers, one is Bong Joon-ho and the other is Park Chan-wook. So these filmmakers you should know. From Asia, they are bringing their kind of storytelling. So that, and who else? Robert Burks. Before that, Billy Pitzer, another American cinematographer. This is like old Hollywood. Suddenly I remember Intolerance, then your Judith of Bethulia, Way Down East. Uh, he worked with D.W. Griffith actually. So, again, wonderful filmmaker, wonderful cinematographer. They actually created the grammar of filmmaking, because D.W. Griffith, if you see close up, before D.W. Griffith, we didn't see close up. So, what was the requirement of close up? Then you go for, D.W. Griffith, how Chaplin worked with his own kind of storytelling, Harold Lloyd. So, you understand all these things. What a long shot is supposed to do. I was mentioning what is a close up and what it is supposed to do. The more you are into all these things, you understand all these things. To Catch a Thief, I mean, we talk about Alfred Hitchcock a lot, but many people don't talk about the cinematographer. So Robert Burks is a wonderful cinematographer. Here you see, North by Northwest. So Cary Grant is running. This is a famous scene, but many people will ask you, who is the cinematographer? Then you have to understand. You need to go to the masters again. You know, Then Dion Beebe, again an Australian cinematographer. Floating Life, Miami Boys, Side by Side. Side by Side was actually a documentary. I think Keanu Reeves was doing it, film and digital. And that was a wonderful documentary. If you haven't seen, you can watch Side by Side. The film and digital, we always talk about it. Dion's one of the finest works, I will say, Chicago. I like Chicago a lot. And, this Australia. So And there is another cinematographer I like from Australia, John Seal. So if you haven't seen his work, Goodwill Hunting being one of the, I'm doing it in a different way today, but one of the films or two of the films I will mention is Mad Max Fury Road, that is with our George Miller. And when we talk about English patient Anthony Minghella, another great film. So I'm doing it in a different way today. But if you haven't seen English Patient, watch this movie. Wonderful performance by all the actors. All the actors gave wonderful performances. Gabriel Trade gave a wonderful score, and then beautiful photography. Then Mad Max, talented Mr. Ripley, and I think you have seen Dead Poet Society. So again, a wonderful movie. There is one name I want to mention, Eric Messer Schmidt. Some new names. Uh, I started with, I think, Darius Konji today. Then when I talk about Mank, which is about Citizen Kane, how it was written, wonderful cinematography. The moment I saw the movie, I knew that this is gonna get the best cinematography or production design. Wonderful production design and cinematography. A wonderful cinematography. So he did it, and David Fincher again. So few filmmakers, I will say, many filmmakers do it, but few filmmakers, they know what they want to do with their camera or cinematographer. David Fincher is one of them. Terrence Malick is one of them. And there are many other filmmakers. I mean, most of the filmmakers I have mentioned, they know their stuff. But when I am mentioning the collaboration, you should focus on the collaboration. And one person I must mention with this camera, when it comes to camera, this is Steven Soderbergh, and he did some wonderful work with the red camera while shooting with Che. He did it in two parts, but wonderful command over the camera. So, I mean, all the directors and I mentioned, they have a really good command over their visual language. But Terence Malick, when it comes to Terence Malick, class apart. When it comes to Stanley Kubrick, class apart. We always can learn from these people. Edward. Wonderful person, wonderful cinematography. I'm doing it in a different way today. Again, Todd Haynes, Steven Soderbergh, Wim Wenders, Ulrich Fedel. He has worked with all of these people. So, wonderful cinematographer. If you look at Carol, you will look at the cinematography and you will understand how color or the cinematography is helping to tell the story, emotion of the characters. Then Far From Heaven, Ken Park. If you haven't seen Ken Park, you can watch this movie. The Velvet Underground, one movie I would recommend. So go for these movies. You will understand the work of the cinematographer. Then Ben Richardson, not even. We talk about Robert Richardson. There is another person called Ben Richardson. No, sorry. Yeah. So one particular movie I will mention, Beasts of the Southern Wild. Uh, Wonderful work. Now, though, Edgar Wright and all these people are working. So, new filmmakers, you should come, new cinematographers, you should come, you should have a great collaboration, and we can have that. So, a few filmmakers and few cinematographers I wanted to mention, and we will talk about some other people too who are starting out, some new filmmakers, and we are talking in terms of the poetry, in terms of the storytelling aspects. So, you know, again, if you don't know about the Addy camera, let me show you the picture of the Addy camera. And whatever I say, I am not having any inner meaning to one of these things. This is what I want to say, this is what I am saying. It is not like that. I am straight away giving you this session where I am mentioning few things, and then from the next session onwards we will straight away go to the poetic aspects, philosophical aspects, something more we can achieve with the camera rather than having just the exposure triangle. So and the emotional aspects, how it is helping to find the emotion of the character, evoking an emotion in the audience. So this is the Arri camera. This is the lens. You change the lens, you have the entire setup in place. And Panavision, I mentioned Panavision, I gave you the link. So this is Ben showing the camera setup. Acha, one thing I must mention, let me just talk about anamorphic a bit. Let me show you. This is the anamorphic lens, right? So this is the anamorphic lens. I think I had mentioned it in one of the sessions. This is the anamorphic lens and different kinds of anamorphic, but anamorphic, how it looks like on screen, because we will know about the technique, and we will know about the technology, and we will know about the effect of this. So here anamorphic is having this effect, spherical is having this effect. Now your choice of direction, or your choice of vision, your direction, your choice of cinematography, that will guide you which lens to choose. So you will find a significant difference in the visual storytelling when you are using these two lenses. So generally we mention these spherical and anamorphic, how the aspect ratio is affecting, getting affected. So normal lenses, spherical lenses, then your anamorphic, then your lens flare, how you are using lens flares. Here you can see Spock. So this is just a scene. Now, how you are shooting a movie with this lens, with having a particular perspective, emotional effect, and all these things, right? So these things we will talk about. Why I am mentioning this, you will understand that uh, if you go for a discussion, once in a while you will see people are doing a lot of discussions, you are listening to a lot of discussions, but you are not understanding what is anamorphic, what is spherical. There is a bad attitude I have seen in the people, and that is also an effect of the culture only, that has come from the trolls only, celeb trolls that mix. When you understand, when you listen to a term called the spherical thing, when you listen to a term called the anamorphic, you don't study, you don't go for the research. That's why we emphasize a lot on the research too, right? So when you do the research, when we do the this anamorphic and spherical, when you listen to these terms, when you listen to a name of the cinematographer, when you listen to a name of a director, when you listen to the name of the movie, you watch the movie, you watch the effect of cinematography, you watch the effect of, if you are going for the titles too, you understand how the title is significant for that particular movie. Is there a disconnect between the title and the movie or the story itself, or there is a consonance, or there is a great connect or congruence between the title and the movie? That is part of storytelling too. So you are writing a paragraph, suppose you are writing a story, then you are giving it a title. How the title is supporting the story, how the story is supporting the title. It is not just the title in vacuum and you are playing with it. It is not just the name of the cinematographer and you are playing with it. Rather, we are looking at cinema, visual aspects, visual storytelling, and how beyond these games, above these games, how we are looking at cinema significantly. Then you will understand, you can take up a camera, you can take a picture this way, you can take a picture that way, you can change the lens to a this lens, you can change the lens to a that lens, what effect it is going to have. You already know the shallow depth of field, but you know, in your psyche or in your visual memory or in your aesthetics, if you take a 3.5, it is going to have a certain effect on the audience when they look at the picture or when they look at the movie. If you take a 2.8, if you take a 1.4, if you take a 1.2, it is going to have a particular effect. Along with it, the sensitivity of the lens, the aperture, how much it can be opened, all these things are coming into place, and the relationship with the exposure triangle. But the emotional aspect, the perspective, because when you are using the wider lens, you are having a deeper depth of field. When you are using a telephoto lens, you are using a telephoto lens. For example, I mentioned some Asian filmmakers. If you look at Kurosawa's work, Akira Kurosawa's work, Sensei, he worked a lot with telephoto lens. There is a movie called Rhapsody in August, and he actually uh, changed the art direction to have a particular kind of perspective, a particular kind of emotional feel. So you can take your camera forward to take the scene. You can use a 50 millimeter lens, it will have a particular perspective. You can take a telephoto lens, you can just zoom, and it will have, if you have a zoom lens, you can do the zoom to have a particular millimeter, and then you can have the effect of telephoto lens. You can have a fixed telephoto lens where you are having a particular lens only when you are not having the zoom facility. So how you are using those things to tell a story. But again, I gave you one instance, but you can understand uh, how you are using the lenses to tell the story. So I will end it here today, and so I will end it here today. Cool. It's almost 1 hour, and I think we can wrap it. But again, I just mentioned: are you taking the camera forward? Uh, are you taking the camera forward? Are you changing the art direction or the production design? Are you, um, you know, doing some other changes? But what is the effect you are requiring? If you are meticulous about that thing, then you can take those decisions. So last day in the episode 1, we talked about the decisions. Now you can take those decisions based on whims or games, or you can take those decisions based on the requirement of the story, requirement of the director's vision, requirement of the cinematographer's vision. So what path are you going to take? That is going to affect the story, that is going to affect the cinema. And this is inherently connected with the passion, enthusiasm, and love. Because if you love cinema, then only you will take those meticulous steps and meticulous decisions. Otherwise, you will just keep it as it is. You don't bother, But we are talking about cinema where we actually bother. If the costume is a bit different, if the color of the costume is a bit different, if the cast is a bit different, if the particular situation is shot in a different way, all these things are going to affect my film, my story, my vision, right? And we all are going to be a part of it. It is not like that, oh, it is the cinematographer who shot it, it is not my responsibility. It is not it is the editor who edited it, it is not my responsibility. I think as a director, when we talk about creative leadership, we take the responsibility, we take the blame, but before that we are very proactive about it. We know what we are doing. So even if something goes wrong, we learn from that mistake, and maybe in the next film we can do it right, we can make it right. So from that place we will do the next sessions. Thank you so much for being with us. I think you can understand one thing: if you have gone astray by looking at the end of today's session, you can come back.